On April 26, 2013, a frantic 911 call shattered the quiet in Citrus County. Chelsea Huggett, a young mom, was on the line, her voice trembling as she claimed her 2-year-old daughter, Aliyah Marie Branum, had been poisoned. Cops raced to the scene, expecting a medical crisis, but what they found stopped them cold. Aliyah wasn't just sick, she was lifeless. Her tiny body was a map of bruises, blood seeping from wounds no toddler should ever have. This wasn't poisoning. This was a crime. As detectives dug in, Chelsea's story unraveled like a bad lie. No toxins, no poison, just a chilling pattern of abuse. Her timeline was a mess, her behavior shifty. She was hiding something ugly. What really happened to little Aliyah? What was her mother so desperate to cover up? And how did a 2-year-old pay such a brutal price for someone else's cruelty? On April 26, 2013, the authorities were called to a grim scene involving 2-year-old Aliyah Marie Branum. It wasn't the first time they'd been summoned to check on the toddler's safety. Over time, multiple concerned calls had been made about her well-being, but that spring day marked a heartbreaking end. Chelsea Huggett, Aliyah's 21-year-old mother, was the one who dialed for help. Her voice shaky, she told the dispatcher her daughter had accidentally ingested bug spray. When paramedics rushed into the home, they found the toddler unresponsive, her small body lifeless on the floor. But what stopped them cold wasn't just her condition. It was the alarming sight of her injuries. Bruises covered her tiny frame, far too many for a simple accident. Despite their best efforts, the paramedics couldn't save her. Aliyah was hurried to Citrus Memorial Hospital, where she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. From the moment first responders laid eyes on her, the scene screamed something far darker than an accident. Her skull was fractured, her left eye swollen completely shut, and blood trickled from her nose and ears. These weren't the signs of a child who'd mistakenly swallowed poison. It looked like she'd fought a brutal battle, one she couldn't win. When police turned to Chelsea for answers, she doubled down on her story. It was an accidental poisoning, nothing more. But the details didn't add up, and her demeanor only deepened their suspicions. While most parents would be shattered, Chelsea was oddly composed, almost rehearsed. She didn't cry, didn't falter, just stuck to her script, her focus on keeping her story tight rather than mourning her child. Her refusal to cooperate initially stalled the investigation, but the truth couldn't stay buried. The autopsy results laid it bare. Aliyah's death wasn't caused by bug spray. Blunt force trauma had ended her life, and it was no accident. The medical examiner ruled it intentional, with every piece of evidence pointing to Chelsea. She was swiftly charged with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. The case painted a chilling picture. Chelsea was either directly responsible for Aliyah's death or knew far more than she let on. But what could drive a mother to such a point? And what had the girl endured in her short life? Aliyah wasn't like other kids her age. Born with multiple disabilities, she faced challenges from the start. One of her conditions caused her right eye to turn inward toward her brain, a serious issue that required care and attention. Chelsea, fully aware of her daughter's needs, reportedly did nothing to address or treat it, leaving Aliyah to struggle without the help she deserved. The investigation began to uncover a pattern of neglect, raising questions about how long Aliyah had suffered before that final fatal day. The bruises, the fractures, the untreated conditions, they told a story of a little girl failed by the one person meant to protect her. Little is known about Aliyah Marie Branum's biological father, but the horrors she endured at the hands of her mother, Chelsea Huggett, and the systemic failures that left her vulnerable are painfully clear. For months leading up to her death, warning signs piled up, but the authorities' inaction allowed the tragedy to unfold. The first red flag appeared in June 2012, when Child Protective Services received 2 calls from worried individuals. They reported that Chelsea and her 2-year-old daughter were living in a sweltering storage shed, an environment no child should endure. A third caller clarified that the situation was even worse. Chelsea and Aliyah were homeless, drifting without stability or support. Yet Child Protective Services did nothing. No investigation was launched. No one reached out to check on the toddler's safety. The agency's stance? Living in a shed or being homeless didn't automatically mean the little girl was in danger. That assumption was a devastating misstep, and Aliyah's life was at far greater risk than anyone realized. Just over a month later, in July 2012, another call came in, this time with more alarming details. The family was still homeless, and Aliyah was in dire condition. The caller described a frail, malnourished toddler suffering from severe diaper rash that had gone untreated. It turned out Chelsea frequently left her in the care of her boyfriend, a man who refused to perform even basic tasks like changing the little girl's diapers. The result was predictable. Painful rashes, constant discomfort, and a baby left to suffer. But neglect was only the beginning. The boyfriend was also abusive, reportedly threatening to kill both Chelsea and Aliyah on multiple occasions. As dangerous as the boyfriend was, the true threat to the baby's life came from her own mother. Chelsea had a volatile temper and no patience for the normal behaviors of a toddler. Aliyah, like any 2-year-old, would cry, fuss, or throw tantrums, natural responses for a child her age, especially one with disabilities. But Chelsea wouldn't tolerate it. To her, these were offenses that demanded punishment. According to reports, the young women's methods of discipline were nothing short of horrifying. When Aliyah cried, Chelsea would smother her mouth with a blanket, silencing her by force. Then she'd strike the toddler's legs with enough force to leave finger-shaped welts on her delicate skin. These weren't isolated incidents, but a pattern of violence that defined Aliyah's short life. At just 2 years old, she had already endured more brutality from her mother, the one person meant to shield her than most people witness in a lifetime. The system's failure to intervene left her trapped in a cycle of abuse with no way out. In August 2012, a former co-worker of Chelsea Huggett could no longer stay silent and reported her to Child Protective Services. The incident unfolded at the Veterans Administration office in Central Florida, where the mother and her daughter were waiting. When 2-year-old Aliyah began to cry, as toddlers often do, Chelsea's reaction was chilling. She clamped her hand over her daughter's mouth and nose, stifling her, then struck her on the back. The co-worker, horrified by the blatant cruelty, knew she had to act. That wasn't the only time the co-worker raised the alarm. In another disturbing encounter, she noticed Aliyah had been left in a soiled diaper for hours. When she finally changed it, she was shaken to find bruises on the little girl's legs and a diaper rash so severe it was bleeding. These weren't just signs of neglect. They pointed to something far worse. Spurred by these reports, Child Protective Services finally opened an investigation into Chelsea's treatment of her daughter. She denied every accusation, insisting she'd done nothing wrong. But the caseworkers were starting to piece together a troubling pattern she couldn't easily dismiss. During questioning, Chelsea let slip a telling admission. She was grappling with anger management issues, triggered by Aliyah's supposed refusal to listen. She even acknowledged needing counseling to cope with her temper. It was a rare moment of candor, but it wasn't enough to paint the full picture. Shockingly, the investigation fizzled out almost as quickly as it began. Caseworkers concluded there wasn't enough concrete evidence to prove Chelsea was abusing her daughter. Instead of digging deeper, they had Chelsea sign a document promising to stop using excessive corporal punishment, a slap on the wrist for a mother who'd admitted to struggling with rage. The decision to close the case so hastily is staggering, especially given Chelsea's own words and the mounting concerns from those around her. Co-workers and friends had seen her unraveling, openly complaining about the burdens of motherhood. She didn't hide her stress or the resentment she harbored toward her own child, yet the system let it slide. The case may have been shelved, but Aliyah's plight was far from over. In January 2013, her name surfaced again when a concerned caller contacted Child Protective Services. They reported that the girl looked disheveled and was still suffering from a severe diaper rash, now so bad it had spread across her entire pelvic area. The caller also revealed that the little one had a genetic condition affecting her feet, but Chelsea wasn't seeking treatment for it, leaving her daughter's health to deteriorate further. Just days later, Aliyah's grandmother spotted something even more alarming. A bruise on the toddler's lower back, shaped unmistakably like a handprint. When Chelsea wasn't physically lashing out, she was verbally abusive, screaming at the child to shut up with a venom that chilled those who heard it. The warnings were piling up, but the system continued to fail Aliyah, leaving her trapped in a home where love was replaced by violence and neglect. Yet another investigation into Chelsea Huggett's treatment of her 2-year-old daughter was launched. But same as before, caseworkers claimed they couldn't find solid proof of abuse. That narrative shifted when a pediatrician, an expert in spotting child abuse, examined Aliyah. His findings were undeniable. Several bruises on her thighs screamed physical harm, clear as day. Armed with this evidence, authorities hauled Chelsea in for questioning. Under pressure, she cracked, admitting she struggled with a chemical imbalance that made her temper flare out of control. More damning, she confessed to hitting Aliyah as a form of punishment, a direct violation of the agreement she'd signed months earlier, swearing off corporal discipline. Her words painted a grim picture of a mother unraveling, with the little one caught in the crossfire. If that wasn't enough, Chelsea's behavior during the interview sealed her lack of restraint. Right in front of investigators, she snapped at doctors asking about the bruises on Aliyah's body. Her outburst wasn't just a slip. It was a window into the anger that simmered beneath, the kind that had nowhere to go but toward her vulnerable daughter. Despite these glaring red flags, the investigation fizzled out in a matter of weeks. The caseworker, unbelievably, concluded there wasn't enough evidence to confirm Aliyah was being physically abused or mistreated. Still, the concerns were too loud to ignore completely. As a half measure, the caseworker drew up a safety plan. Chelsea and her boyfriend were made to sign yet another set of documents, promising not to lay a hand on Aliyah again. It was a baffling move. Chelsea had already blown off the first agreement she'd signed, yet the authorities seemed to think another piece of paper would magically rein in her outbursts. Predictably, it didn't. In the weeks that followed, those close to Aliyah, family members and neighbors, started noticing a heartbreaking change. The once bubbly, playful toddler was fading. The girl grew quiet, withdrawn, and visibly scared, especially around her mother. The spark in her eyes was dimming, replaced by fear. Chelsea, meanwhile, only grew more volatile. She gripped nonstop about her daughter, labeling her needy, difficult, a burden. But the truth was simpler. Aliyah was just a toddler, craving the love, patience, and care any child needs. In private text to a friend, Chelsea's resentment spilled out. She called her daughter a brat, whining endlessly, impossible to handle. When Aliyah made the smallest misstep, spilling something, making a mess, Chelsea's frustration boiled over, and she took it out on her defenseless child. The pattern was clear, but the system's refusal to act left Aliyah with no one to protect her from her mother's wrath. On April 24th, 2013, Chelsea Huggett rushed her little daughter to Citrus Memorial Hospital via ambulance because the toddler's hands were swollen. The doctor figured it was an allergic reaction, treated her, and sent them home that same day. Aliyah seemed okay for a bit, but by evening, she was lethargic and not herself. Chelsea told her friends a worrying story. The 2-year-old had accidentally swallowed ant and roach killer. Alarmed, they urged her to call the poison control hotline. She did, and the hotline was crystal clear. Get Aliyah to a hospital, immediately. But Chelsea ignored the advice. When poison control followed up, she coolly claimed her little girl was fine now. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Over the next day, Aliyah's condition quietly worsened, but the mother kept it under wraps, avoiding any more scrutiny. No one heard a peep about the little one until April 26th, when a desperate call brought paramedics rushing to the home. They found the toddler unresponsive, her small body limp and lifeless on the floor. The baby was gone. Chelsea scrambled to shift the blame, claiming her boyfriend had poisoned the 2-year-old with bug spray. The authorities weren't falling for it, and as usual, her story didn't hold up. The autopsy delivered a gut punch. Aliyah hadn't died from any poison. Blunt force trauma was the cause of death, and that was the smoking gun investigators needed to take the young mother into custody. With the truth laid bare, Chelsea's defenses crumbled, and what she confessed was beyond horrific. She started by admitting she'd refused to take the child to the hospital after the poisoning. Why? She knew the second doctors spotted the bruises covering her daughter's body, she'd be arrested. Then she unraveled the chilling sequence of events that led to Aliyah's death. At around 4 a.m. on April 26th, the little girl wouldn't stop crying, and Chelsea snapped. She'd had enough. She grabbed her daughter, shook her violently, and slammed her head into the bedroom wall. As if that wasn't enough, she headbutted the toddler, unleashing her rage on the defenseless child. The brutal head trauma left Aliyah unconscious, her skull fractured, her brain bleeding, and her tiny body covered in injuries. But what Chelsea Huggett did next was beyond comprehension. Instead of rushing to call paramedics or getting her dying daughter to a hospital, she carried Aliyah's limp, unresponsive body to the bed, laid her down, and just stayed there beside her. She did nothing, no attempt to save the baby slipping away. 4 agonizing hours later, Chelsea finally dialed 911, but it was far too late. Aliyah's final moments were steeped in pain, confusion, and fear. Feelings no child should ever endure. Yet the mother showed no shred of remorse. Instead of crumbling with guilt or owning up to her actions, she coldly justified the violence, saying her 2-year-old wouldn't shut up. That was her excuse for beating her daughter until the cries stopped, and with them, Aliyah's breath. At the time of her arrest, 21-year-old Chelsea was 8 months pregnant. A tattoo of Aliyah's name and birth date adorned her chest, a hollow gesture that meant nothing when she took her daughter's life with her own hands. Armed with her chilling confession, authorities charged Chelsea with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. She pleaded not guilty, defiant in the face of overwhelming evidence. While awaiting trial, she gave birth to another baby girl. But the fate of that child remains unclear. Reports at the time hinted the baby's father was fighting hard for custody, likely desperate to shield her from the tragedy that claimed Aliyah. In the end, Chelsea took a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Aliyah Marie Branum's life was cut heartbreakingly short, and in her brief 2 years, she endured unimaginable suffering. Her story is all the more devastating because the system had multiple chances to step in and save her, but left her in the hands of a monster. What do you think about the outcome? Was Chelsea Huggett's 30-year sentence enough for the crime she committed? Could the authorities have done more to protect Aliyah? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you're interested in more cases like this one, don't forget to subscribe and be sure to check out the next video below.